Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you?
I'm doing great. It is a happy Friday, as our guest told us before, reminded me at least. I don't know. These weeks are so screwed up after COVID, but it's Friday.
Yes.
So
I firmly believe that time is just this made-up construct. It doesn't actually exist. It's just boom. Yeah. Well, after COVID, I mean, I lost entire months during lockdown, as I'm sure most of us did. And it was funny because yesterday Jack was like, he's our what's his official title? Oh my gosh, customer success specialist.
Customer success.
For those of you who have not met him yet, he was like, "Does today feel like Friday?" I'm like, "No, just because it's your Friday doesn't mean it's everybody else's. Stop bragging." But as you said, I know it is. But I just said before, we do have a lovely guest with us today. Today we have Destaney. I forgot how to ask to pronounce your last name. Is it Wishon or?
It is. You didn't need to ask. Perfect.
We have Destaney Wishon. Welcome to the show, dear. We're happy to have you. And you're calling in from Arkansas?
I am. Bentonville, Arkansas.
Bentonville.
You gotta throw in the Bentonville. It makes a difference.
Yes. So is that like the capital or something? Because I used to have a client back there in my previous life. We actually had a few clients in Bentonville.
So it's the home of Walmart, which is why it's kind of a big deal. Every vendor has something or another here. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Gotcha. Have you always been there, or did you just kind of land there serendipitously?
I have always been here, so it's really funny, working anything Amazon related, because it's basically a sin. Like, Walmart is a big deal here.
That's hilarious. Well, let's talk about that. How did you get into the Amazon world?
So I got started straight out of college. I was working for a full Amazon consulting agency. It was like one of the first ones in our area. And they were primarily focused on like retail media and working with vendors. So I kind of got started like the exact opposite of most people in the space. I got trial by fire, thrown in incredibly quickly. And I remember like being 22, flying out to like some of these home offices and just speaking to retail media and managing like $10 million of spend on Amazon. But no one knew Amazon at that time. So it was like, who cares if it's this young person leading it? Like, they'll figure it out. So it was incredibly exciting and like the most amazing experience to learn as much as I did in a short period of time. But it was a lot. It was the past 3 years. Time does not exist. I agree.
Thank you. It's just this facade.
And what is retail media exactly?
So what I'm kind of referring to when I'm talking about retail media is that it's a much bigger world than just what's on Amazon. You're considering what's happening within stores. You're really looking at like consumer marketing, and you're seeing it as a big picture rather than just worrying about your performance on Amazon or for any one very micro detail. We're looking at the brand as a whole, which I think is a little bit different a concept because we know so many native brands that start on Amazon and they scale incredibly quick until they're a large brand, but sometimes they're zeroed in on only Amazon. Walmart's still the largest retailer in the world for another few months or a few years. And then you also have the opportunity to like really look at your brand presence on social, in stores, things like that, and seeing that big picture a little bit more holistically, as the buzzwords say.
I'm glad you asked that question, Francois, because I also had the same one, but I didn't want to ask. As someone in marketing, I'm like, I should just know what this is.
Well, there's so much that goes into it because when I was with Coca-Cola, I was shadowing one of the industrial engineers, but also to get that job, I also had to be a merchandiser. And working in merchandising is a great job, I would say, no matter what. It's a very hard and laborious, I think that's the word, laborious job itself. But when you're working with your team, a lot goes into sort of like planning out those end caps and fighting with the Pepsi merchandisers saying, this is my end cap. This is not your end cap. I just set everything up. So yeah, really focusing on that brand, of course, it's something that I think as consumers, we don't think about. We just walk by and we're like, oh, we like that, or it's closer to the registers, or it's right before Super Bowl Sunday, and Coca-Cola wants to make sure that they have all their products front of the store, no matter what, on a big display. So yeah, no, that is one sector that I think a lot of businesses, as they go into this retail space, because like you said, a lot of them are just on Amazon, but I think we will start to see, as more capital flows in, we're seeing, Perch, Thrasio, we're going to start to see sort of this B2B transition, right? Where they're going to start to get into these stores. That's not what we're here about today, but I just completely sidetracked us. Sorry.
No, we could definitely dive into that conversation, because speaking in terms of in-cap is what the majority of the vendors know. Like, that's the language they're used to. So I've had to find a way to translate that into what it means on Amazon. So Coke and Pepsi is actually one of the easiest examples I always use, because they've always focused on their brand presence. So we can segue to that in a little bit. It was the perfect opening for this conversation.
Well done.
Awesome. So when it comes to, I guess, brands that you work with, when it comes to advertising for brands that you work with on Amazon, what exactly does that mean? Like, what exactly is advertising on Amazon? I know PPC is the buzzword, right? Everyone talks PPC. That's like the sexy topic. But there's like the sponsored ads, I think. And I know I've heard you on a few other shows that just dove into a few different types of advertising, just ways to spend on advertising. So what are those different ways?
So if we're starting incredibly high level, I think it's important to talk about like why Amazon advertising is valuable to the general audience who maybe doesn't know. And the main reason being is, if anyone types anything into Amazon, any keyword, any search term, they're typically looking at purchasing. Like, we've talked about how powerful Google ads are. We know how disruptive Facebook and Instagram ads are, and that's all amazing. But at the end of the day, if someone types in a water bottle to Amazon, they are looking at purchasing some form of water bottle. And once you change that mindset, that real estate becomes incredibly, incredibly valuable, because you're able to serve an ad to someone who's looking at purchasing immediately. And I think that's kind of gotten lost in translation over the years, because Amazon was this easy advertising platform. You could get incredible returns up front. And now that we're seeing, larger budgets being shifted to the platform, that's when we need to get more strategic. We need to look at sponsored products versus sponsored brands versus sponsored display versus video ads. And that's when you really have to get incredibly detailed. But at the end of the day, if we go back to talking end caps, brands look at putting products on end caps because they know they're going to get more visibility. They know their customers who are going to walk near that aisle are going to see those products, and you're going to try to get them to purchase. They may not have wanted Coke, but they're walking by the soda aisle and they saw Coke and then they purchased it. Amazon, I would say, is even more powerful than that, because I can actually serve an ad and show my product to someone who typed in soda, not just a consumer who may have walked by the aisle. I can serve ads that directly. And, it makes it really fun, but it's a lot easier than I think what most advertisers realize, because there are so many buzzwords. There's so much terminology out there that people aren't aware of. But that's kind of what I think is the most valuable aspect of Amazon, is how precise we can get with our targeting.
And by that, do you mean like relating it to the retail space? Like, when you go into a wine section, for example, they're going to have wine openers. They're going to have the electronic versions, the manual versions. Is that what you mean when you say, like, you can target them for different keywords that aren't your product, like soda instead of just Coke?
Yes, exactly. It's a little bit harder. I could not run a Coke ad and target soccer ball, because that would not be a clean customer experience. If someone's looking for a soccer ball, they don't want to see a Coke ad. You can do that with certain DSP advertising, but that's getting really top of the funnel. But that's exactly what I mean. You could target pretty much anyone who could potentially be ready to purchase your product. So a wine opener, you could probably target a charcuterie board and get some impressions, because it is closely related. Oh, yeah. Or, that's a Friday vibe.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what you have the opportunity to dive into and look at. And then again, with DSP, you can use audience insights as well, purchase behavior and things like that. But that's where, when I talk about buzzwords, like Amazon has a million of them, and that would be getting incredibly in depth.
And DSP stands for
Amazon's demand side platform. So traditional to pretty much any other programmatic display marketing, Amazon has their own. They just don't tell a lot of people about it.
They keep lots of things vague, don't they?
Yes, very vague.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, well, it gives them a chance to just do whatever they want, which to
yes.
their right, you know, it drives innovation, which is awesome. But when it comes to those demographics, that's one thing I don't think we've had the pleasure of talking to anyone about. What exactly can you target? Like, can you target everything that you have on Google Ads also?
Somewhat, and this is where Amazon does like to keep things vague. If we're talking sponsored ads, you can target keywords, you can target products. So I can literally say, I want to target all of these products. They're my competitors. I want my ad to show up on their product detail page. Or you can target keywords. If anyone's typing in these keywords, let's target them. There is a relevancy metric that Amazon's going to analyze. So again, if you're selling Coke and targeting soccer balls, they're going to be like, no, that's not relevant. We shouldn't do that. So with sponsored ads, that's kind of the fundamentals that you want to start with, is just simple keyword product targeting. With their other advertising platform, that is the programmatic advertising platform, you can target demographics. And you can get incredibly specific. You can remarket audiences. You can say, I want to target everyone who is between the ages of 27, 29, owns a dog, drives a Lamborghini. I don't know what audience you'd want to sell to that demographic, maybe a $3,000 collar. But that's like the data they have. They're not very open about it. You know, Amazon's always known for not sharing a lot of that customer data. That's why a lot of brands are uneasy about it. They have that data. They just want you to pay for it. So that's always a cool thing, but also a fun discussion to try to navigate, because they do keep it as kind of a high barrier to entry.
But do they make it as simple as just like saying, these are the demographics that I want to target? Like in Google, you could say if someone's single, married, the ages that they want, the regions and locations.
Yes.
But with
it's that
Amazon,
simple.
Okay.
But most brands don't own the platform. Most brands have to go through Amazon themselves to run this type of ad, or work with a verified agency, which is very limited number, all things considered. So they haven't really opened up the opportunity for brands to see that and run it. They're working towards it. We're getting more and more data at literally every single day, but that's why it's kind of that high barrier to entry.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's ads are something that I never really think about as a consumer until we have conversations these. Well, I'm just like, if it looks cool, I'll buy it. But I'm also very price sensitive. So if I see an ad for something that's extremely similar to what I'm about to buy, I will probably click on that ad. If it's like $1, let's say 10% less than whatever that listing has. But I mean, the topic of conversation is really making better sponsored ads, right? What exactly makes a poor sponsored ad?
Having a poor listing, something that's not retail ready, which I listened to your presentation with Emma the other day, and I'm really good friends with her. And one of the comments she made is like, she is awesome. Great energy, great vibe, good friend. But she had made the comment of, with Amazon advertising, we're not able to influence the conversion rate that well. You know, I can't, like on Facebook, I can create a beautiful ad. I can write amazing copy and have a video, and that's going to influence my customer journey. They're going to want to convert better if I have an amazing video. On Amazon, I don't have a lot of that. The majority of their ads are traditionally just an organic placement that says sponsored. Like, it looks just like the rest of the placement. So one of the number one things you can do, and this is a huge misconception in the space, is run ads after your products are retail ready. A lot of people try to jump the gun, and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to drive as much traffic as possible, even though I only have one image, terrible content, terrible copy. I want to drive traffic. Like, that's what's the exciting thing, is like people seeing your product. But at the end of the day on Amazon, you have to make sure your listing's gorgeous. It's ready to convert. It has all the bells and whistles. And then that's when you want to start running sponsored ads to that listing. So that's kind of the fundamental thing, which sounds really basic, but we do see a lot of people get, overly excited to run ads to their product when it's not ready.
It's because it's probably because there's so many podcasts and things about like PPC and ads and go out there and spend
money.
Yeah, that's probably because that's all that they're seeing. I would assume. I don't know though.
100%. That's what we do for a living is we audit brands in order to run their Amazon ads. So it'd probably be in my benefit to be like, yes, I'll sign anyone and everyone and run all of your ads for you regardless. But at the end of the day, when I don't have the capability to influence conversion rate, my performance is directly tied to the ability of a brand to create an amazing listing. Mm-hmm. So that's something we've had to get really good at auditing is just what does it look like to have a good listing? What is your conversion rate? And then beyond that, driving as much traffic as possible once it's ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you look for when you are auditing them? And I don't want to steal any of your internal secrets, of course, but if a brand is considering going into sponsored ads, or it's a major brand that just wants to get into Amazon, what do they need to consider? Aside from what you mentioned, having a good listing, and Emma dived into very in detail about what that means, which is great. But what conversations do you have?
So everything Emma said, probably. And then at its core, I think the biggest metrics that make the most sense are just like your conversion rate. What is your unit session percentage and how well are you converting? Because if you're converting at a 5%, you don't want to drive a ton of traffic if only 5% of it's going to convert, especially spending money to drive more traffic. So that's kind of the biggest detail that we look for. And then we look at the small things like you mentioned, like what is your competitive advantage? On a retail shelf, you go through an aisle and there's only so much shelf space, literally. There's only so much square footage in a store. So the buyer vets what brands deserve to be on that shelf. And then you typically see a heavily vetted 10 to 15 different toothpaste brands. Amazon's not like that. Anyone and everyone can throw up a product. Doesn't mean everyone should. But you type in toothpaste or toothbrush and you'll see 300 different options. So we really had to start diving into what is that competitive advantage look like? And then what is the conversion rate? And do I think that you should be running ads over someone else is really based on those two metrics.
But that sort of leaves the topic or this sort of chicken or the egg situation, right? Some brands want to get in and they have no background. It might be their first product that they're launching, right? We're getting more into the new Amazon sellers or online retailers. I like the term Amazon seller, but online retailer is really what they are if they want to keep scaling and growing their brand. We're pretty vigilant of everything that goes on in the Facebook groups, in the Amazon Facebook group specifically. And a lot of the questions tend to be, I'm just launching my product. How much should I put into PPC? Because they don't have those conversions. They don't have those reviews. What would you recommend to those new sellers? Because it sounds like you have to look at the conversions in order to, of course, optimize ads and make better ads. But how do you even get those initial conversions?
Well, reviews are a tiny piece of the puzzle. It's a great call out because in the long run, it's one of the most important things you can do. But when you're launching, you just have to control the variables that you're capable of controlling. So you do make sure your listing is absolutely gorgeous prior to launching. And I think that's where people typically jump the gun is on that aspect. They don't want to invest in their A+ content. They don't want to invest in the SEO optimized listing because it is expensive, but that's where you need to start. And then once you do think you have a great listing, the beauty with Amazon ads is there's no minimum. You could start out with $5 to $10 a day, and then you could test, and then you could focus on your number one keyword. If I'm selling a water bottle, I can target water bottle in one campaign with $5 a day, and then collect data, and then see how I convert. And then once you start collecting that data, you could tweak as needed. And I think that's one of the biggest areas is it doesn't take 10 to 20 grand to start running ads at a scale to really collect data. I mean, when you're running anywhere else, it's cost per impression. Your targeting audience is based off random variables like age, sex, preferences, things like that. But on Amazon, we're targeting people who are looking for our product, which makes the data so much more valuable. And I feel like we can, gather insights quicker from that data.
But is that, I mean, something like water bottle, I imagine that is a very heavily saturated keyword, for example.
Yes.
I mean, would $5 to $10 even do anything?
It takes, time. You could 100% collect data. Like you can easily create a campaign, $5 to $10, and start collecting data the moment you launch. But you kind of have to know it's chicken or egg. Do you want to spend a ton of money up front, collect all the data you need within 48 hours? Or do you want to take it slow and then expand that data across 1 to 2 weeks, but be more profitable? It's that balance. And that all depends on the cash flow you have within your company. If you have any type of funding, things like that, I would prefer to collect data really quick so I can make decisions faster and start dominating the market. If you don't have that type of funding, then again, you can't control that variable per se. So you have to take what you have and then spread it over a longer period of time and just know your results and expectations need to be aligned with that.
I wish that conversation was had more, aligning your expectations with reality. Right. Yes. And it's because we have these conversations every day, I would say, here at Noviland, and it's about people that want or businesses, new businesses that want to buy, let's say, 200 units from a factory, and they want it at the same price as someone's buying it at a container load, which just is not realistic. And they want all the customizations that go along with it. But just, I mean, on that same note of just supply chain, do you have those conversations as well with just, hey, if you're investing heavily into ads and you want more traffic with the hopes of more conversion, you need to prepare your supply chain beforehand?
I have had more supply chain conversations than ever before due to COVID.
Good. I'm glad.
And it's constantly changing, I think. I mean, we've had things like, due to COVID, something got shut down, and now we have everything that was supposed to be checked in yesterday is going to be 4 weeks from now, which means we have to be so much more flexible. And I think that's where vendors and large retailers are struggling right now. They don't typically have the systems and processes in place to be much more flexible, but they have the cash. And then we have all these small brands that do have the capability to be more flexible, but supply chain costs are increasing across the board right now, mainly due to container shortages and things like that. And then we have advertising costs increasing because we have bigger brands playing than ever before. And then all these small brands who have been able to have like a $4 to $5 return are getting squeezed out. So setting expectations is probably the most important thing I think any of us in the service industry can do right now, because we've always had the upper hand in that we were the thought leaders. We knew exactly what we were talking about. And I think some people took advantage of that and sold their services to anyone and everyone, and caused like this mythical like thought about Amazon and how much money you can make. But in reality, it is much more competitive than ever was before. I don't think I would go and say you can't launch and be successful, because it's still an incredible platform. But you're 100%, you're right. Supply chain in itself is something that anyone and everyone's dealing with. And it is causing second order consequences that people may not be prepared for.
And so in these events, when you are planning out your advertising campaigns, and an issue with supply chain does come up, is it something where you just delay it? Do you have to revisit it to see if it's even a right time? Do you have to reevaluate what your competitors are doing? I guess, can you walk us through that process?
We do. Yes to all of the above. There are a lot of things that come into play with it, but I think Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, is honestly an amazing example of the struggles of owning any type of inventory-based business. Like when we're working with sellers, they have to have money to buy more inventory. So that means we do have to be incredibly flexible with everything we're doing on the advertising side. They don't have the budgets to maybe go all in and focus on brand awareness and focus on top of the funnel metrics, because they need to have that type of ROI. So, hey, Ryan. Something that we have to have a conversation around is, what margins do you need to hit this month in order to receive that inventory? We know Prime Day is coming. We know people need to buy more inventory. So we need to be maybe more profitable the months leading up to Prime Day, so that way they can invest in that. So it's so much more flexible. Like we have to make the smallest tweaks. We have to slow down on bids and budgets if we're selling out of a product, because if they go out of stock, that can be more harmful than, lower volume. It's a constant discussion.
And for those listening to the audio after the fact, we are filming this 3 days after Prime Day. It ended on the 22nd. So coming fresh off the heels of a really big event, what are some of the things that you evaluate after Prime Day is over with your clients?
Prime Day this year has been insane. I think one of the biggest changes we've seen is the post Prime Day hangover for consumers. Now that it's an official retail holiday, I feel like, the first 3 years people knew about Prime Day, but I was like texting my friends and family, like, just so you know, it's Prime Day, buy things. And no one knew about it. Like, everyone knows about Black Friday, Cyber Monday. People didn't really know about Prime Day. And I think this year and last year it really started sticking that it was a big holiday. So everyone saves their money and then goes and spends a ton of money on Prime Day. But if you spend a lot of money on deals on Prime Day, you're probably not purchasing a ton off Amazon following Prime Day.
Yeah. Okay.
So the biggest things we saw is, the 5 days leading up to Prime, we typically saw a drop off in conversion rate. Impressions and clicks stayed the same because people were window shopping, but not purchasing. On Prime Day, we saw every brand who had a badge did like incredibly well. But some of our brands who didn't have specific Prime Day deals didn't do near as well. And I think, again, it comes back to consumers know what they're looking for. They're looking for discounts and deals. So I think that hurt a little bit this year. And then this post Prime Day hangover of like stabilizing budgets back to normal and seeing people drop off on conversion rates has been a little bit of a hit.
Gotcha. There were definitely some good deals on Prime Day this year. I spent all my money in Daytona, so I did not buy. I'm still working on a vacation hangover financially.
Yeah, I got a 3D printer for no reason. So they definitely got me good.
I'm so excited to see that.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I figured why not. I think the ads actually got me from other products that I was looking at before. So
yes,
going back to ads.
That's the problem. You work on the platform and then you just come across things and you're like, no, I did not need this whatsoever, but it's here and I can one click and one of my products shipped in like 13 hours. And that was really cool. Like because I know it's been a mess. Like there's some things that have been shipping well and some things that haven't, but I was like, it's the craziest Amazon holiday of the year, and I'm getting products within 12 hours. Like I am spoiled, and it's amazing.
Yeah, they want you to buy that next thing.
Yes,
because you just had a great experience. But so going back a little bit to supply chain, and we saw, because we also do 3PL warehousing, a lot of businesses that couldn't necessarily get inventory into Amazon itself, and they might not have done Prime Day deals, but they're still struggling between FBA and FBM, of course, just getting that inventory in. Do the ads that you run work for FBM as well as FBA, or do you have to, are they separate ads?
So they do work, and you can set them up to be the same ads advertising two different SKUs, one FBA and one FBM. Okay. I prefer to run them separately. And the reason being is we typically see a drop off in conversion rate with FBM SKUs. Slight drop off depending on shipping times and seller fulfilled Prime and like all these other different aspects. But, fulfilled by Amazon does hold a lot of weight in terms of just like consumers know that it's going to be trustworthy and things like that. So it typically converts a little bit higher. So when I'm looking at my advertising metrics and I have a SKU that may not convert as well, I want to give it a different budget. So I typically separate out my ads and then shift between the two of them whenever we do have to be flexible for FBA, FBM, which was like March, April, May of last year, probably the biggest struggle when those first, shipping limits hit.
Yeah. And I mean, Chinese New Year is, right before that, of course. And a lot of companies struggle with getting those inventories in. So, I mean, that may also affect those months on top of everything that we saw from COVID. So it's a struggle. We'll have to see what happens this year, too, because we're seeing enormous orders compared to anyone that would be ordering for Q4. People are starting to order into May of next year, into summer of next year. Are you seeing something similar with the clients that you speak with?
So I'm not as familiar on that side of the business, but something I was going to mention is going back to our expectations conversation. Last year was unprecedented Like, I know that was probably the most overused word of the year, but it's because it truly was. And we have audited so many brands in the last 60 days who are kind of wondering why maybe their year-over-year sales are down. They're coming to us, my year-over-year sales are down. Can we push more in ads? And I'm having to have that difficult conversation. That's probably not the best move for you. And realistically, it makes sense that everything's down this year, on Amazon at least, because stores are opening back up. You know, everyone bought a ton of things like bikes, gym equipment, at-home decor. All of those categories are absolutely insane. And it's not necessarily things that people repeat purchase. So if you bought it last year, they don't need to rebuy dumbbells this year. So we've had so many brands who had amazing years last year, primarily due to like the COVID catalyst. And now they're wondering why their sales are down, and they're kind of stressing out because margins are higher, supply chain costs are higher, margins are lower, and advertising costs are increasing as well. So they're like, why am I down year over year? What can I do? I'm like, that's normal. Like, you need a longer time frame to look at. Any year with the pandemic in the future, I'm just gonna like write off. Like, please don't analyze any of this data because you can't compare it.
Yeah, I was going to say 2020 was definitely an anomaly, and you almost just have to throw her out the window. Like,
yes.
Treat her like a Christmas bonus, compare everything to 2019, and let's move forward.
100%. You know, a lot of people are like hyped. They're so excited that everything went, hyped that their brand did so well last year.
Yes.
And now it's having, like, I know you want to keep this rolling, and I know you want to keep the momentum going, but it's just not realistic. Like, understand your customers and kind of what their purchase behaviors are. It's just, it would be really hard to hit year-over-year growth if you're not maybe a consumable or replenishable. Like, I don't know how realistic that is this year.
Yeah.
Replenishable. That's a good word. That's a
That
really
is a good word.
That was the word that we were missing when we were talking to Emma, actually. Replenishables.
Yeah.
And I guess, that money should be used right now to just make sure you have inventory. It's the hardest conversation to have on a supply chain side, to tell someone that, you know, their costs from last year have gone up 5-6 times in shipping. And then, of course, you're having those difficult conversations. The trickle effect of these advertising costs are also going up. What are you seeing that companies can do to offset some of these costs?
I think the biggest thing on the advertising side is diversify your advertising. Look at areas, split test everywhere. You know, I don't even manage external ads, but I know that sometimes like the cost per acquisition can be cheaper on external ads. On the Amazon side, definitely test different placements. Don't just try to go after water bottle, which is the most competitive keyword. Look for water bottle for marathon running. Like, look for those long tail terms that can be a lot cheaper, and that's getting really in the weeds. But I think above all, it's to remember that this is a long-term game. If you started a brand to try to make money quick and just like have passive income, I think those days are not over, but it's much more difficult. So understanding like what you're trying to optimize for, and then break down into specifics how to do that. Some people get so caught up in the short term that it makes it hard to have those conversations. And I know it's kind of vague, but without getting incredibly detailed and in-depth with sponsored ads, that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a perfect answer to it. I mean, diversification of sales is important because a lot of times there are those cash flow businesses that solely rely on advertising instead of building a brand, for example.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it if you're in it just for that cash flow, not necessarily to, let's say, sell your brand to a Perch or a Thrasio or any of these larger aggregators or Elevate Brands, for example. So thank you for that. But when it comes to sponsored ads, coming back to sponsored ads, is there a certain target number that businesses should be shooting for their ACOS?
Oh,
I guess in today's
really specific,
which is a little bit different, than last year, of course.
It is a little bit different, and I will say my personal perspective is typically skewed by the type of brands we work with. We are really niche in that we only focus on brands that are typically larger on the platform and really looking at scaling. So what we usually recommend for those brands who are focused on scalability and brand awareness is to run your Amazon ads at break even. And the reason being is the Amazon flywheel is a really big factor in everything you do. So the more volume you drive from ads, typically the better you're going to be organically ranked. The better you're organically ranked, the better your top line sales are. Now, with COVID and just general flexibility, there are situations where we do recommend running at a lower ACOS. Maybe you do need to have more cash flow to repurchase more inventory later on. And that's where we want to be flexible and have those conversations. But as a long-term strategy, we like shooting for break even. We try to view Amazon advertising and sponsored ads as traditional marketing spend. You set aside a budget for it. This is what you're allocating. Now you need to decide how to best spend that budget. And that's kind of how we like to view things.
And are you talking to them about the price points or the offering that they have on their listing when they are advertising also? Is that a topic that comes up?
Somewhat. The majority of my team has came from a full consulting and or like started and sold their own brand. So they're much more eloquent with those style of conversations. But the biggest thing, again, is that conversion rate and how we're comparing to our competitors. Because that's kind of your tell-all of, do you need to make price point changes? Do you need to, adjust based off what your competitors are doing? Are you positioning yourself as a premium brand? It's a lot of incremental details that we want to look at there.
And what does this, you mentioned those that are scaling up. What does that mean exactly?
So the long-term goal for your brand, again, if you're just in it for kind of cash flow and things like that, you probably just want to focus on profitability. So you have, a little bit additional cash to spend. But what we're really diving into is the brands that are driving brand awareness, that care about being someone on the platform. They're launching multiple products within a similar category. They're looking at growing their on-platform presence. Because I think one thing that's tricky with Amazon is no matter what keyword you type in, the first thing you're seeing is a sponsored brand ad. The next three things you see are a sponsored product ad. Then you see an organic ad, which means if you're not running ads, you're probably losing market share because it does not matter. Like there's no way to get around it. Amazon is kind of a little bit pay to play and that they prioritize their sponsored ads over their organic listings. So it doesn't matter if you're ranked number one. So with that, we always try to level set and set expectations of if you're looking at growing on the platform, this is what you need to invest in. And this is why we recommend potentially breaking even.
And we actually have a question from somebody watching on YouTube. I'm going to say the name as I read it. Me has Sharpie. Have you noticed the ratio between sponsored sales and organic sales swing in favor of one or the other while applying the break-even strategy?
Yeah, this is a great question. So when we're looking at sponsored sales versus advertising sales, it's typically around, anywhere from 30 to 55% split. What number we kind of prefer to look at more is advertising spend to total sales, because that kind of accounts for competition in the space, things like that. And if we're looking at advertising spend to total sales, then what we usually want to look for is around 10 to 15% in a healthy account. We've seen numbers as low as, 4% still do incredibly well, but they're usually in a low competition category and organically ranked number 1, 2, 3 across the board. And then if we're in a high growth category, we typically see TACOS numbers be closer to like 15 to 20%. But that's kind of the general averages. It is very dependent on category. Things like supplements versus apparel have two very different type of consumer audiences. So we usually see a bigger swing in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also important to differentiate for anyone that doesn't know the ACOS versus the TACOS. And I know we've talked to Dustin and Chris before about it. And great guys, great friends also. Yeah. But can you sort of differentiate those two?
Yeah, of course. So when you're looking at ACOS, you're only comparing your advertising numbers. It's just spend divided by sales. So it does paint a really good picture of what's going on the Amazon advertising platform, but that's the only thing that you're considering is the Amazon ad side. When you're looking at TACOS, you're looking at advertising spend divided by total sales. The reason that metric can be a little bit better is because it then shows you if I'm increasing my advertising spend are my top line sales increasing? Am I thus getting ranked a little bit better, which makes my organic sales increase further? And that's kind of what we really want to look at, because at the end of the day, your organic rank is probably the most important aspect of the business. Like, you need to be on page 1, so that way you're not solely relying on ads for everything that you're doing. So that's kind of why we want to look at TACOS to get a better picture. And I've had some products, that have closer to 70 to 80% ACOS, but it pushed organic ranks so highly that my TACOS was really healthy and the overall account was more profitable.
I appreciate that breakdown personally, so that I can hear that now when I read the word, instead of just reading tacos and being hungry. Every time I read it, it's just tacos.
I try to play it. There's certain scenarios where you definitely want to say tacos. It's a better vibe. But then I sometimes have to say TACOS. It flows. It's more, I don't know, professional.
Professional? Yeah, I guess that's the right word for it.
Versus tacos, I don't know.
So it sounds like it's more of like a compounding. It sounds like everyone's racing to that first page, and if you're using advertising, you're on steroids.
Yes.
So you're trying to get to that first place position just to maintain that same pace. How long? It's a very vague question, but how long does it usually take to see a good return on tacos or TACOS?
Tacos.
I don't even know how to answer that. If we're being fully honest, we've seen such varying degrees of what a brand owner thinks is good for them.
Okay.
That I'm not even sure, because it kind of depends as well on maybe they are in stores and they want to use Amazon for new customer acquisition and then hope that people are going to go to their store or their Shopify site. Then maybe they want to push so much more aggressively in ads. And it's just such a catch-22 question. Again, high growth, we typically see 15 to 25% TACOS or tacos. And then anyone that's focused more on cash flow and profitability, it's anywhere probably under 10% is where you want to go. But if you're doing anything externally for ranking, then that's going to skew that number as well, because you have something influencing your organic rank. So maybe you don't need to go as heavily in ads. There's so many different variables. And that's why I love this more conversational format rather than just presenting anything, because e-commerce in general, we have to be so much more specific. There's always been this retail guide, how to get in stores and talk to a buyer. And it's pretty much the same for every single company, small intricacies. But with e-commerce, there are so many different variables people need to manage. And I don't know how everyone keeps up. I only do Amazon ads, but I think we have to be so much more flexible.
Well, and talking about how the ads actually look themselves, and we talked about kind of the placement of sponsored versus organic, page 1, things like that. But what's the content? And I guess it depends on the kind of ad that you're running, but just for the basic, I search for water bottles. Here's a sponsored Contigo ad that I absolutely clicked on 2 days ago. What is the information that is included in that? The image that's used, is that just your first of the A+ content, or do you get to pick a separate cover image?
Nope. So for sponsored product ads, it is the exact same organic listing image that you see. So when you type in anything, you get all of your tiles, all of your products. The sponsored ad's the exact same one. We have zero control. And that's why we mentioned we can't control your conversion rate, because we have zero control over any of that. And then it's a little sponsored. I think it just says sponsored in gray letters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I don't even know if most consumers know the difference, because Amazon's done such a good job of only showing relevant ads. They really don't want to show anything else. So when customers see 5 water bottles and they're all heavily rated and look fantastic, they don't know that 4 of them are sponsored and one's not, because they look exactly what they're looking for, which I think is really powerful in their part. But I don't think it hurts a consumer most of the time. They don't know.
Well, and that's what's so funny is we've talked about this before. Back when I first started, Francois, we were Googling something and you clicked on the first one because you're like, "Oop, make them pay for that ad." And I'm like, I don't even want it. I skip past the sponsored ones because I'm like, I want the organic result for what I got. I'll go buy them. Even on Amazon, I will skip by them unless the sponsored ad just so happens to be exactly what I was looking for. But half the time most of the time I'll skip it, which I think is funny.
Yes, we have a joke with the brand click karma. If you click on someone else's competitor ad, that's going to come back to you and your ACOS is going to be higher. So
Yeah, I mean, as a consumer, I want them to pay for what I'm paying for. I don't know. It just is what it is.
True.
If they're targeting me and they did a good job targeting me, I'm probably going to buy it if I'm clicking on the ad to begin with. So you're
get the attribution for it. Like,
yeah,
I guess the advertiser probably enjoys that.
We've determined through most recent conversations, Francois and I are very different consumers. We're learning this.
But you mentioned also external traffic a little bit earlier, and I know that's not something that you focus on, but is that also a conversation or something that brands should be thinking about to improve their ads? Because the ads are all about traffic, right?
Yes.
So if you just see that brand somewhere else, you have some level of brand recognition, then you would think that the traffic is better on Amazon.
100%. Now, I will say that it's necessarily better from an algorithmic perspective because that changes very consistently. And I think Amazon prefers you to probably spend money when they're making it through their advertising platform. But at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to that like diversification conversation of test all the platforms. Maybe TikTok resonates incredibly well with your audience and it's cheaper. And if it is cheaper, run that to your Amazon page. I of course am partial to Amazon because I think there's nothing like serving an ad for exactly what someone's looking for, but it is getting expensive. During Prime Day, we saw clicks upwards of $40. So we were paying $40 a click. And even at 100% conversion rate, we were taking a loss on those, but we did it for brand awareness purposes, but it is getting much, much more expensive. So that's where it's like, if you cannot be profitable due to how high and how competitive it is in your space, maybe it's worth looking at Instagram versus Facebook and finding that blended approach that helps you get both ROI, but, incredibly fantastic brand awareness.
Is there a general rule of thumb of how much a brand typically spends not on Prime Day versus Prime Day?
Not typical. I would say for a lot of our large retail brands that had deals, we spent upwards of like 5 to 10x on Prime Day. For one keyword alone, we spent over $50,000. Like now that attributions hit, which is pretty crazy that many people were searching for that keyword. But it's pretty dependent on categories. Like again, replenishables and consumables, we saw do really, really well. Some of those kind of standard items that no one's really thinking of, and then they didn't run deals on top of it, we actually saw spend decrease because no one was clicking on their ads.
Mm. And we actually have another question from Miha Sharpie. Do you jam phrase, exact, and broad matches into the same campaign, or do you make a separate campaign for each targeting type?
Great question. I personally prefer to make one campaign for each targeting type. The reason being is we typically see exact match as the most profitable because I can control the bid for exactly what I'm showing for. Broad match is typically like 5 to 6% higher ACOS because there's multiple search terms for any one keyword I'm targeting, but it drives 2 to 3x the amount of sales because I'm covering so many more placements through their search terms. So when it comes to budgeting, all Amazon advertising budgeting is on the campaign level. So we do like segmenting them out so I can give more budget to my exact match keywords, less budget to my broad match because they may not be as profitable.
And can we give just a quick rundown of what the difference between phrase, exact, and broad match is for those who may not be familiar?
Yes, and I won't be able to articulate this perfectly. Amazon has a great graph on it. Pretty much.
If I can find it.
That's exactly. If it's a water bottle and I'm bidding on water bottle in exact match, that means a customer has to type in water bottle or water bottles in order for my ad to show up. It has to be exactly what you're targeting. Mm-hmm. If it's water bottle and phrase match, then I think it'll show up for like water bottle for kids or blue water bottle. It still has to be in the phrasing of that phrase match. But again, you can see how it can get a little bit more expansive. Rather than just targeting water bottle, I'm now targeting water bottle for kids, running, things like that. It's a broader targeting. Now, if we're running it in broad match, then that is even wider nets. Then it's like bottles of water, I think is kind of the biggest distinction is it can now split things up or it can get really, really broad there. It's basically the difference. I don't have any other water bottle examples top of mind, but Amazon has some great graphs on it that you can show. So
awesome.
And when you make those, can you also select the category that they would be in? just because I know I was listening to your episode on my Amazon guy, and you used highlighter as an example. And highlighter, of course,
Ooh, that means...
when I think of a highlighter, I think of something on my desk that I'm going to use to highlight something on a piece of paper. In the different sense, it's more of a makeup.
Yes,
right.
It is a makeup.
It's a makeup. So can you select what category you want to target within?
You cannot if you're doing keyword targeting, which is where you 100% have like really intricate crossover that could happen. So you need to be very specific. Maybe only target, highlighter for girls, makeup highlighter, something that's like super, super drilled down and niche, because you will have some of that. Now, that's where Amazon's gotten really good at like understanding what needs to show, what doesn't need to show. So they're kind of working on improving that correlation, but we definitely see that crossover. There was like one other really big product, like, phone charger. If you bid on phone charger and you have Apple or Android, those are gonna be two very different targeting types. So even though your product is a phone charger, you don't wanna bid on phone charger. You want to bid on the exact match, very specific targeting, because that was a crossover we ran into issues with. We're getting a ton of iPhone clicks and we're not selling an iPhone product. So that was a learning lesson. Too broad.
Too broad.
And those are more so the long tail keywords that I believe you mentioned a few times. But with those long tail keywords, to the question from one of our viewers, would you use that for exact, phrase, or broad?
I prefer to test in all three still.
Okay.
Exact match, again, is going to be like the most profitable one, usually, because you can specifically say, this is what my bid needs to be. This is where my ad's showing. You have direct control over the whole process. I like running in broad match because Amazon gives you all of the data that people are typing in, which is kind of creepy, I think. But all of the data they type in, when they click on your ad, you can see. So if I'm bidding on highlighter and broad, I can pull what's called a search term report and see that most of my customers are typing in highlighter for summer, highlighter for desk, highlighter for essays, and then I can see what they're converting on and then continue to reinvest in that data.
So you would go back and change, would you just add in more keywords into that same campaign of what exactly they're searching? Or I guess if you do that in a broad, would you add that into an exact?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But sometimes I'll pull those long tails and I'll continue to put them in broad because I'm just going to find even broader terms. Now, once you get that long tail, your impressions are going to lower because the majority of consumers are not typing in something that specific. So you kind of need to balance that. Like if I'm bidding on highlighter, I'm getting a huge audience. I'm getting both the makeup audience and the pen and paper audience. But if I'm bidding on highlighter for college students at a certain university, like that's such a micro audience, you're not going to get a lot of impressions. That's why you kind of need to balance both.
Is there a minimum number of, because Google has a, it's not a feature, but it's something about Google where if it's too low of traffic in search volume, they won't display your ad, I believe. Does Amazon have something similar, like a minimum threshold?
Not really. We have seen like maybe less than 1% of the time I'll like bid on a keyword and it'll be like no data available, but it doesn't hurt anything. So your whole campaign will still continue to run. You just won't get a lot of data for that one keyword. And we've seen some crazy long tail things, like especially running in broad match. Like we've seen like absolutely crazy responses where I'm like, how did anyone even type that in? Like who thinks about that?
That is creepy. I don't want people knowing what I type in.
They know everything.
There's like
they know it all.
Everything. That's like when, Apple asks me to share data. I'm like, you guys already have it all. Yes. Just like serve me a better ad. Like, I don't even care at this point.
Yeah, no, it's creepy, but it definitely is the feature. And it's how a lot of businesses are going to have to compete when it comes to just traffic in general. With so many, let's say someone comes up with this brand new inventive idea. I'm sure in the next 5 years, you're going to see 10 more just like it, just like we saw for PopSocket, just like we saw for so many other awesome products, fidget spinners, things like that. What do you see the future of advertising on Amazon sort of morphing into?
I think they're going to give us more creative control. Amazon's trying to manipulate like social. they're trying to build like social integration to their platform. They now have live streams. They have the ability to like do Amazon posts, editorial recommendations. That's a big push on their end, because I think what got them here won't get them there. And like what got them here was allowing everyone to sell on their platform. So if you look for a purple pin, you now see 3,000 purple pins. And like, that's what helped them scale incredibly quickly. But now we're at the shift where I don't want to see 3,000 pins as a customer. I want to see the best pin. I want to see like the pin that's like investing in their branding, their thought leadership, things like that. So I think that's a big shift, is it's no longer going to be like anything and everyone. It's going to be a focus on truly the best products that any customer can really, really value. And I think it's going to be fun.
That's how I keep describing the supply chain. It's going to be really fun in the next few years.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Exactly.
So they had their tryouts, and now they're going to pick the best candidates.
Right.
The best brands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, we'll have to have her on again. We're at time, man.
Yeah, we are at the
more
time.
In. I don't want to. If I let you keep going, I mean, because I have
That's
questions
true.
about like retargeting and everything like that. But we're gonna have to have her on a second time. But let's get you one more. Let's get you one more.
I forgot it. What was your question about retargeting?
There's too many questions. Like, I'm assuming like if you're able to serve ads on a competitor specifically, then you can serve retargeting from if I click on, I keep praising it. I love this water bottle. If I click on Contigo, an ad for Contigo, and then I don't end up buying it and get on Amazon later, can Camelback serve me an ad? They can like specifically retarget ads for their competitors' clickers.
They can, 100%. On sponsored display, you don't have as much control over that. It's a 30-day look back window, and it's everyone who viewed a product similar to yours but did not purchase. So if you purchase the Contigo, you won't be remarketed on a sponsored display. Now on that, super shiny advertising platform, the DSP platform I discussed, we have control over all of that. I can handle the frequency. I can handle, how often I want them served an ad within a certain period of time. I can even choose products that are nowhere near mine. So if you're into water bottles, I can make the assumption like, hey, let's serve this person Hydrolyte or Liquid IV or something like that, because I know that they drink a lot of water because they have a water bottle. So you can get much broader with your targeting, and then again, control the frequency, certain things, age range, all of that. So yes, it's there, but it's kept on a shiny little shelf.
That's so interesting. Oh, you've shared a lot of great information here today, Destaney. Thank you so much. And for everybody who asked questions online, let us know if you have any more. We'll send them over to her. But let's take a minute to talk about your business. Let's go ahead and give you a quick plug.
Yeah, of course. Well, one, thank you guys for having me. This is always a really fun conversation because you can go really, really deep, but it's such a complicated discussion once you start going that deep. So I would love to dive into remarketing and all the specific targeting we can do. But if anyone is interested in any of that information, I typically post anything and everything on LinkedIn incredibly frequently. I try to keep it super content oriented. All the new Amazon updates, things like that, I get posted. If you want to check out our website, betterams.com, feel free to do that. We typically work with brands that are doing, at least $100,000 to $200,000 a month on the platform, helping them scale their ads. And if you need any other information, you can also check out the Better AMS YouTube channel, where we're posting more tips and tricks for Amazon ads.
Awesome. And we'll link all of that information in the description of the video and of the audio experience as well. Destaney, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really been such a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right. Thanks. And we'll talk to everybody next week. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Bye.